On May 7, 1945, World War II finally came to an end after the brutal years of continuous fighting since 1939. A crucial turning point occurred when the aggressive, fascist Germany under Hitler became the losers of yet another war and forced to be at the complete mercy of the Allies by signing an unconditional surrender. The Allies were appalled at the mass suffering the Germans had inflicted upon the Jews and adamant a process of denazification was needed to prevent the atrocious war crimes against humanity. Hitler's death only opened the doors for the Allies to condemn all Nazi members, evidenced by the Nuremberg crime trials in 1945, and the term collective guilt was heavily placed upon the shoulders of all German people. The ways in which each Allied power approached denazification differed, due to the decision to separate Germany into 4 zones. The American zone was the most vigorous in the process of denazification, even estimating to take 50 years to complete.
All Germans might not be guilty for the war. It would be too difficult to try to single out for better treatment those who had nothing to do with the Nazi regime and its crimes.
The first step for the Americans was to send out a questionnaire to determine who were guilty of being a Nazi, who were associated with Nazism, and what degree of guilt should one be held accountable for. 5 categories were established: major offenders, offenders, lesser offenders, followers, and exonerated persons. Unlike the other 3 zones, the Americans categorized all Germans over the age of 18. However, the process was extremely slow, and other issues in Germany were not addressed, such as the widespread famine.
They wanted to treat Germany as a defeated but still dangerous nation. In September 1945, the American Military Occupation Authority issued a law prohibiting the employment of any member of the Nazi Party except as a common laborer. Top officials in the Information Control Division urged General Clay to abandon the idea of a publicity campaign. Those officials asserted that the campaign was bound to fail because the German people understood the purpose of denazification but remained extremely against it.
The success of denazification was seriously questioned, as by the autumn of 1948, US efforts were directed at reorientation at the grassroots level. Re-education represented the most promising method to transform Germany into a democratic, peace-abiding nation.
The effort to excise Nazis thoroughly from positions of political power failed. Many Nazis escaped punishment and remained in political and judicial positions. The American effort to denazify its zone proved more successful than the programs in the other occupation zones.
Denazification was hardly implemented in the French zone, due to the government believing all Germans were to blame for the war, and not just the Nazis. The French had actually collaborated with Germany during the Vichy regime, after quickly falling as early as 1941 in World War II, and therefore even membership to the Nazi Party was less important than in other zones. Similarly to the British and US zones, the French believed in denazifying through education, but in reality could not enforce it, as they attempted to remove over half the German teachers, to only realise that the schools desperately needed them, so ended up rehiring them. The relationship between France and Germany grew, shown by the eventual plan Schuman proposed in 1950, which called for Germany and France to unify their coal and steel production. The denazification programme was not really attempted, except for the humiliating shaming of French women who were romantically tied to Nazis, but overall rooting out the Nazis was a failure in the French zone. Britain were themselves economically strained from the devastating impact of war, and so rebuilding Germany as an economic power who wouldn't depend on Britain's limited resources became their main priority, overshadowing the importance of denazification. Britain's leniency towards industrial owners in the crucial economic area of the Ruhr enabled Germany to recover and be self-sufficient, unlike the US zone.
The British Foreign Office, nor any other agency, advocated for draconian policies for Germany. Instead, plans were aimed at establishing security and stability. In the short term, British planners wanted to ensure security for their military government apparatus by preventing the German economy from collapsing. To achieve this, they intended to remove only those Germans hostile to their aims for positions of authority and retain others who were indispensable to running essential agencies.
Denazification by the British was not as thorough as the US. People were only required to fill out the questionnaire if they were applying for an influential or responsible position in society. For example, German teachers were categorized by the British as black, grey, or white. Nazis were considered black, who had to be dismissed. Grey were determined as followers, who needed further investigation, and whites were exonerated persons, who could hold on to their positions. Re-educating the German people with democratic ideals was an integral part of denazification in the British zone. However, Britain's status as a world power began to decline post-1945, resulting in her inability to make long-term plans with the occupation of Germany.
The British government assumed the best way to guarantee its own national security was to establish a British-style liberal democratic government in Germany. Hoping that it might revive healthy democratic traditions that had once existed at the local level first, policymakers decided to re-educate Germans and to install popular elected administrations from the bottom upward.
Denazification was more successful in the US zone, but the German people were treated less like criminals, encouraging some American-zoned Germans to seek shelter in the British zone. The process of denazification was strongly influenced by the Soviet aim to communise their German zone. As long as you fully cooperated and engaged in active support with the communist regime, then you would be acquitted from the past charges against you as a Nazi. Denazification appears inevitable if everyone had to be a communist, but the German people only had to pretend to support Stalin's ideals and keep their Nazi thoughts hidden from the Soviet soldiers occupying their zone. What is your political opinion?
I am a communist now.
Were you ever a member of the Nazi Party?
Absolutely not.
Did you have any associations with the Nazi Party?
I am a communist.
I understand you are now, but what about before the Soviet occupation?
I am a communist. A Stalinist. Forever.
Clearly, the Germans need to be thoroughly watched to ensure that they will never become a threat to international peace again.
Yes, but this time we can't destroy their resources or inflict mass starvation. Even the French, despite blaming the Germans for everything, agree that we need to rebuild Germany in a more positive manner.
To ever rebuild a Germany means exterminating Nazism and any form of fascism in the country.
Of course. Obviously, incorporating communism is the most effective way to achieve this. No chance ever for fascism to rise again.
I mean, well, Stalin, you can do whatever you please in your zone.
Thank you, comrade.
Please, just call me President Truman.
Well, anyway, I think the British zone will definitely aim to help the German economy.
All that sounds great, but our main concern should be denazification.
Of course it should be. Their ignorance in supporting fascist regime brought about a rightful downfall. All no correct regime is communism.
We need to drive out all the Nazis, no matter how long it takes. They committed horrific war crimes. If we don't implement a thorough program of denazification, then we risk another threat to international peace.
Well, all of you seem to have a great handle on how to achieve denazification in your zones. So, I will leave you and have my own plan. Goodbye.
One day I'm going to make sure that communist idiot doesn't spread his delusional ideas into the world.
Looks like we have a new Hitler on our hands. Denazification had failed, and now a new threat to international peace emerged.